Okay, in this video we're going to have a Fieldcraft video, something I haven't done for a while. I was thinking about this over the last couple weeks here as the farmers are out harvesting and that stuff. You're going to have a lot of wide open areas that you're going to have to cross during fall through early spring and potentially into early summer, depending on when crops are harvested and planted in your area. So it's going to be a lot of wide open spaces. Now the best way to cross that stuff is in an extended formation, either a wedge or diamond. You know, some variation like that, whatever your unit comes up with. For distance between personnel, you need to be thinking at least 10 meters, possibly up to 50 meters distance between people inside the formation. When I was in the desert after 9/11, when we were moving through the desert on foot, not in vehicles, we used to keep a spacing of at least 50 meters between people in formation. We stayed just close enough that we could still see hand and arm signals or hear an order being passed down, yelled out and that stuff, but we stayed as far from each other as possible. This was to limit casualties from potential mortar or rocket or IED strike or landmines. So we're going to be coming into this situation like that. We're going to be moving into this scenario in an extended formation. Now the scenario that we have here is crossing irrigation ditches. This is going to be different everywhere. In my particular area, it's not that uncommon that you're going to come across irrigation ditches that are over 10 foot deep, possibly 20 to 30 depending on the topography of that particular area. These irrigation ditches are done to drain off excessive water from the fields. So they'll have the fields tiled. The tiles will run into these county controlled ditches. The county controlled ditches will take the water away to wherever its final destination is, whether it's a stream, a creek, a river, you know, a lake, a marsh, whatever. That water typically is going to be heavily contaminated with farm chemicals, pesticides, and fertilizers. So you do not want to take any water from those ditches. Doesn't matter how much you purify it, how many filters you run it through, it's still going to be heavily contaminated. You're going to get sick from it. So stay out of the water inside those ditches. With that in mind, how are you going to get across? Let's say you're moving from one location to another and you're going to have to cross one of those 10-foot irrigation ditches. You know it's coming along. Now, how wide is that ditch going to be? It really varies. Typical distance I see on them, they look about 15 to 20 feet wide. Some of them down to 10 on the shallower ones, but they're pretty wide. You're not going to be able to just jump across them. At least the ones in my area. So we got to cross it. We're moving from one area to another. We got to get across this irrigation ditch. Now, just like with any obstacle with engineers, your first option is always bypass. Find a way around it. Avoid it. If you got to add a couple extra kilometers onto your hump time, onto your march time, do it. Go around that obstacle. Now, if it cannot be avoided because of time restraints or because of its general, you know, domination of the terrain you have to cross, you know, you're going to have to try crossing it somehow. First option is there's always going to be some location along that ditch that has some type of culvert or bridging going across. It could be because of a roadway crossing it. It could be because the farmer had a culvert put in there and has a little, you know, like here, an earthen type dam going across that he can either walk across to check his fields on the other side, or potentially drive a tractor or his pickup over. But there is typically going to be some type of crossing somewhere on that irrigation ditch. Barring that, if the crossing is so far away or you don't trust it, you're probably going to have to make your own bridge. And if you're going to make your own bridge, you're going to have to know what's the size of the gap, how far across it is. You're going to have to bring the materials with you for laying out for crossing that gap, and it's not going to be easy. But first we'll do the bypass. We couldn't do it, so now we're finding a location to cross. We got one of these little earthen dams with a culvert running through it so that the water is flowing through the culvert. This is a potential crossing point from us. We're over here. We're trying to get over here. Now, we're not going to walk directly up on it and then close our formation and walk right across. We have to check this out. We have to make sure that this crossing point, and it includes roadways and bridges and stuff also, you got to make sure that that danger area is not covered by enemy observation and enemy fires, and you also have to make sure it's not mined or booby trapped. They may not mine and booby trap the bridges and roadways crossing the ditches. They could mine and booby trap the approaches to it, but they would not do the roadway itself. But something like this out in the fields where this is an earthen embankment and that stuff, or earthen dam, the chances of it being mined or booby trapped is pretty high, depending on the force that you're engaging. If they allow in their doctrine the use of anti-personnel devices, they're probably going to have some on these. The question is, will they have them observed then? Is there going to be a team or a squad or a platoon keeping this under observation so that they can ambush anyone that's coming across? Ideally, we're going to come up on this in the dark. We're coming up on it at night. So we come up, we're going to stop short. We're going to get people into position on both sides of it, watching and scanning the area. We will then send a small team forward who will stop short of. They will get down in position. They will provide their own little local security covering this area here, while the rest of the element is covering all this up in here. But our team that came forward, they're just focusing on around here, around this crossing point. They will then check that out as much as possible. Now, if there's enough light, maybe they'll check it out by using binoculars or night vision, as best as they have to check it out to see, do they see, you know, say stake mines hidden on there? Do they see tripwires? Do they see indications in the ground that there could be a potential landmine there? Next up, you're going to send 1 or 2 people forward, no more than 2, to check it out. They're going to go through, they're going to check it as thoroughly as possible to make sure there is no mines, no booby traps on the approach, on the crossing, and on the exit from the crossing. So they're probably going to be told, start your search maybe 2 meters forward, 5 meters forward, going across, and then up to 5 meters on the other side. This is going to take some time. It's not going to be something that's going to be done quickly. You want to do it as quick as possible, but you also want it to be as thorough as possible. If you're doing this at night, it's going to be a lot harder. You go through, you check, The one or two that get to the other side, you might have one person that's going to come across, one person's right there with them as their, closest security and back up in case the person gets injured. They get across, they clear it, everything's okay, they get into position, they signal the rest of their team back here. Whoever's in charge of that team then signals the rest of the element. This team moves forward, becomes the far side security, and then your main body back here will start moving across. And when they cross this, they're going to do it as individuals, and there should be distance between them. Say at least 5 meter intervals. And when they cross, they should cross it as quickly and as safely as possible. If they can do it at a run, they should do it. But you got to be careful that you don't slip off the sides and fall down, potentially drown, break your neck, break your leg, anything like that. And then as each element comes across, they reform over here, then they move forward and take up defensive positions farther up until everyone's across. At some point during this, the team that's over here doing the local security, they will rejoin their squad or their position inside the formation. And then once everyone's across, our security that was over here, the last ones coming across, they're the ones watching our rear, making sure no one's coming after us. After they come across, then the whole element continues its march forward. Now, this could potentially be hurried up if you had access to some type of mine detection equipment. But, remember, that stuff, especially if it's a metal detector, it's going to react to basically anything metal. And since these are farm fields in here, you can guarantee there's going to be metal in it. I have a hell of a time whenever I use my PSS 12, whenever I test it out and that stuff. I'm finding metal in farm fields all over the place. It can be nails, it can be pieces that fell off of farm equipment, farm trucks, whatever. The stuff's, it seems like the ground is just peppered with it, like it was almost sown with it, just like along with the seeds over the years. But that's an option. You could use some type of metal detector. Now, what if we're something like this? There is nothing like this that we trust, or the crossings like this are for sure mined, and we know they're under observation because our little recon element we sent forward noticed the enemy sitting on the other side, so then we had to divert. So this is where you have your scouts traveling ahead of you, checking out ahead, and then sending back information before your main body gets there, and then you go through, do your crossing drill. We got to cross now somewhere else. We know the distance of this obstacle, of this ditch, and we've brought along materials for bridging it. Now, what could we use as materials? The easiest would probably be tree trunks, tree branches, and that stuff. Make sure that they cross the other side and you get some distance, say maybe 2 to 3 foot in length on either side of it, to give you a little bit of stabilization so it's not just going to slide right off into the ditch. You want that overlap, that overhang. Make sure that the amount that you have together is wide enough that a person can walk across, preferably a person can run across. You'll have your team come up with the wood sections. They will then stand them up. You'll know how far forward close to the ditch you should be. You know what your overhang is. So if we know that this is generally where the edge is, we got an extra 3 foot on each end. Well, 3 foot roughly from this point is where we're going to stand the poles up, and then having a couple people control them in the fall, maybe even having a rope tied to the top of it as we're lowering it forward. We'll lower them across like a drawbridge, getting them in place, getting them closer together. Maybe we'll quick tie it on the one end over here. have one person go across while one person is on each side of it on this side, just giving it that extra support and stuff. That one person goes across, ties it off over here. He then sets himself up as local security, signals for the team to come across. They do security, far side security on their little bridge that they have in place. And then same as before, signal back to the main body and everyone starts filtering across. How are we going to get that bridge pulled out then? Once everyone's across. The team that put the bridge in, once we get everyone across, you're going to have one person go back. He's going to untie the lashing over here. He's then going to tie the ropes that we use to lower them on the other ends. We will brace the logs or wood on this side with our feet, whatever is available. Using the ropes, we'll start picking them up, standing them up straight, and then bringing them down, untying them, doing that to each one till the entire bridge is pulled in. We'll take it with us and move on to the next location. We're not going to leave it behind because, you know, we may need it again, or we just plain don't want the enemy to know what we did. Maybe we'll take those logs and we'll hide them somewhere farther up. And if we have to cross back over, we'll check those out and use them for getting back to the other side again. Who knows? Maybe we're just crossing this ditch because we're doing a mission over here. And then when the mission's done, we got to cross it again to get back to our safe area. So these are just some potential ways this could be done. I want to hear suggestions from you guys. Remember, we're coming at this as a light guerrilla organization. So we don't have access to AVLBs. We don't have access to pre-manufactured bridging. We don't have access to helicopters. Think of this along the lines of the Viet Cong, okay? Use that line of thinking and let's hear some suggestions. Let's come up with something for this. Now, for all my engineer brothers in the Patriot and militia movements, always remember, essayons.